Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. We have a special treat today in our studio. Indie folk pop trio Distant Cousins is here to join us today, and I am very, very excited. I guess there's two ways to describe them. One is to call them the super band of the Jewish world. Dov Rosenblatt led the band Blue Fringe. Duvid Swirsky was a founding member of Moshav, and you probably know Ami Kozak, both for his music as well as his comedy, his advocacy. He's everywhere these days doing his thing. And they have really, he's emerged as a key voice since October 7th, and they've kind of emerged as a key band since October 7th, and I'm excited to talk about that today. Another way to describe them briefly is the Jewish Mumford & Sons, if we will, if you guys will allow that. They just finished their summer leg of their tour with Matisyahu and are gearing up for the next leg of that tour this November and December. They are here today to celebrate the release of their new album, Out of the Darkness, which is available anywhere you get your music. It's a very special contribution to music, and I highly recommend you downloading it wherever you get your music. Or apparently I just heard there's a vinyl out there as well, so if you listen on record, then pick it up as well. All right, guys, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
What an intro.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I know. We're good.
Yeah.
Super band.
Super band. It kind of is, right? Like, what's the story? You guys there are three kind of coming from different places. How do you have three? How does that happen? Yeah.
So we all sort of grew up in and around, I would call it like the Jewish rock folk scene that developed in Israel and the East Coast. And we were in bands that would play together, Moshav and Blue Fringe.
I was a fan in the crowd.
Yeah, Ami was a big fan.
And plotting.
Yeah, exactly.
I will be in that band.
Him and him.
Yes.
And me. One day.
And but I remember seeing Blue Fringe. I remember seeing you. I think it was a Hillel conference. I was president of Hillel, and we went to here, and you performed, and I was like, "What is this?" I remember I got the CD. I was so excited. I was like, "This is a whole new thing that I hadn't been exposed to." And say, you mentioned your influences. Say a little bit, like when you say this like Jewish rock thing that was happening. Who were the other bands you were thinking of back then? Who were the ones that brought you into who you guys became?
Yeah, so I grew up in Israel on a moshav called Mevon Modi'in, which founded by Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, who really, I would say, revolutionized Jewish music in the middle of the century. So I grew up in and around that when there were there was just music everywhere. Mm-hmm. A lot of the parents played music, and all the kids played music on this moshav in the middle of Israel. So that's really, to me, where it began.
That was the beginning of this kind of genre, let's say. Did you overlap with him there?
I got to play with him a few gigs before he passed away. I was about, I guess, 14, 15.
Wow.
He would always have like 30 people on stage often would end up. So
way before Arcade Fire.
Yeah, exactly.
He was the first indie band.
The first real indie
They were
band.
real indie.
Edward Sharp, Shlomo Carlebach, and the Magnetic Zeros.
But it was incredible. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, but it was such an incredible experience, and just to be around that was really amazing.
Yeah,
life-changing.
Play it out for me a little more detail. Like what sticks out in your mind about, he's a special person in our history. What sticks with you from that age? I know it's hard to remember when we were 14 or 15.
Yeah. I often think about this. I think it's the second time I ever played with him was at the women's high security prison in Israel, which is in a city called Ramle, not Ramallah, which is a different city. It's a harsh city, and obviously the high security prison is really harsh. And when you go to a prison, it's intimidating anyway. And then we walked through these hallways, and there was like whistling and yelling. I was a teenager. I was really, really nervous besides everything else. And this is a prison with like even, terrorists, really intense energy. And then we set up and they brought all the women, I would say about 1,000 maybe five, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 women into this basketball court. Mm-hmm. And the band was set up at the end of it. And everybody was nervous. And we're about to start, and one thing they kept telling us is don't interact with the prisoners, whatever you do. And Shlomo put his guitar down, went to the back, and literally hugged and kissed every single prisoner. It took about 45 minutes. I remember it being like an hour. But by the time he got back, even as a teenager, you could see the energy just completely changing. And it was just an incredible concert.
So that's what we do now.
Our shows take a long time to start. Because there's three of them. I've known each other like over 10 years, and every story.
Yeah, we still get
new stories.
We never know.
Ours are these we talk about our backgrounds, but he'll just say like, So one time we floated in on a cloud, and there was only one horse in Israel that could fly, and Shlomo found it. It was
I'll
just
tell you
weird,
the truth.
but he had a bass, and I was just like playing on the back of the horse and carriage, and then
really-
hugged the horse, and the energy changed.
There was something really
Endless
wild.
amount of stories from you.
Sometimes I'm glad I was there with other people. I have to ask,
Yeah.
like, did this actually happen? And yeah.
But you once told me he after one of these chaotic shows, he came up to you and he goes, and you were playing bass at the time, and he would say, "Duvid, I hear you on the bass." I was like, giving you this little spark of encouragement.
There was always a little bit of encouragement.
Yeah.
There was, yeah.
Wow.
Well, I remember when then, I guess you coming from Moshav to America, I grew up not the same at all, on East Coast, and listening to, there was Jewish music. There was Diaspora Yeshiva Band. We would listen to, one of my first concerts was Safam.
By the way, Yehuda's dad.
Yeah, Yehuda's dad. See, it was all, we were connected before we knew we were connected, honestly. But there wasn't so much that I remember, at least, of like a Jewish music scene of bands performing together, collaborating, all of that. And then I just remember when Moshav came, it was right around the time that when I was in college, we started a band with some friends called Blue Fringe, and it was like quickly kind of picked up, I think because there was not much going on, and also, sonically, just stylistically, all of our influences were actually just more from mainstream, just all the music we grew up listening to that was not Jewish music. That's a whole other conversation we get into all the time amongst ourselves, is what is Jewish music, how do you define it, and then when Moshav came, we quickly, became fans and friends, and we started, I know that Blue Fringe, Moshav, and Soul Farm in particular, those three bands, we did a bunch together, like B.B. King's and Irving Plaza and all these places.
Bring back memories.
Yeah, same.
And I think I think those three acts in particular, growing up, took Jewish music out of just serving a religious role in Jewish life and brought it into more of a cultural part of life.
Right.
So I think that's the way I kind of saw it, was like you're taking these modern influences and it still is within this qualifier of being Jewish and celebratory and putting it out there in a modern way.
Right.
That's what you guys were really doing in those days. It was, in most of the time, serving religious, ritualistic purposes, prayer, or in a communal sense, and this was bringing it out into the culture, which I thought was
right. And I feel like
that kind of impact.
It's I associate also the time when I saw you with like the '90s boy band era. Not to compare, but I think a little bit like my colleagues were looking up to Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and those kind of things, and then like they emerged. There's like this Jewish band, Blue Fringe, that's playing at your college. Yeah, and like people, I don't want to like not swooning, but like very impressed and excited, and that it was Jewish was like a whole new thing. It was like, oh, you could have like a musical hero of some kind who was Jewish, and like the name of the band was Blue Fringe, like a reference to tzitzit, I assume. I thought it was very cool. One more question on that also. We talked about, you grew up around Karl Bach, you grew up around Gary Rosenblatt. So just say a little bit about like, and by the way, figures in our Jewish story here, just say, a little bit about that. How did that influence you, let's say, or what are some takeaways from that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've thought about it before. So my father, Gary Rosenblatt, was the editor of the New York Jewish Week for many years and the Baltimore Jewish Times, and they call him the Dean of Jewish Journalism, which is a very well-deserved title. I think one thing that I never thought about growing up, but just subconsciously it just seeped in, was I would always remember, every Shabbat, people coming up to him at shul, at synagogue, and just talking about what they've read of his and debating him or complimenting, and he was just always so even-keeled about it, and just that's, in general, that's his outlook, I think, is just being, which is very rare nowadays, kind of right in the center, and just fair. And I don't think I realized it at the time how much I appreciate, and now I do, how he humbly responded to everybody coming over to him. So I think it taught me early on like how to deal with, it was so clear that it was more about the art and the craft of journalism and writing and what he's doing, and less about all the praise or feedback or negativity or whatever. That was just all secondary, and he just didn't let it get to him. And I think that was just a really good lesson to grow up with and see. And also just that you can have your art and find a way to make it work, and he really has.
It invokes like a way to think about art, right?
Yeah.
Like how to approach your art is a way to learn that. Great.
Exactly, yeah.
I love that. All right, Ami, What do I do with you, Ami? All right, here we go.
Lock yourselves in, brace yourselves. We're gonna have a little fun now.
We get to take a drink. Right?
Interview's over.
Right. So I mentioned before that someone played a Distant Cousins songs for me before I really got to know you, and then I realized that you were in Distant Cousins, and that was exciting. And around that time, you were moving to Englewood. We'd become neighbors and friends and all those things. You got all this musical talent, and then also at the same time, you've had this kind of explosion of comedy and advocacy and all that. Like, how are you thinking through what you're trying to do in the world as a member of an amazing band, and as a comedian who's running around, and as someone who's really getting involved in the back and forth around politics as well?
I'm tired. I would say that, I always divided it up as music was what I was doing professionally, and the comedy side was just a part of my personality. And in a way, music was a child that I had been nurturing for years, and I studied at music school and took lessons and took it to a professional place. And that's what connected me to Dov and Duvid. When I moved out to Los Angeles, I'd been doing music for commercials, and the three of us started working together, and right away started having a lot of success getting our music in film and TV. And I was a working professional musician, and that was the totality of my creative identity. And the funny stuff was for fun, and it was for friends, and it was social.
Sure.
And there wasn't really an outlet at the time to express that beyond that, because even though the creative arts are kind of similar, you kind of have to pick these lanes.
Yeah.
And there's a hustle in the music industry of how to get things moving, and then in the acting and comedy and other things, and then with social media, that kind of blended all those things, and the barriers were down in order, you had these opportunities now to express yourself in other ways. And I took to that to express some of the comedy, which was sort of a neglected child that I hadn't given much attention to, and there wasn't really an opportunity to do that. But I took to social media as an experiment to try to see what would happen there, and express that, which was able to build an interesting audience, really vehicle through that, which took me into the comedy scene, the stand-up scene, the sketch comedy scene. So I just sort of added that into the totality of my creative identity. And now, a lot of people want process this stuff and say, so what are you? Pick. They will need you to pick.
Yeah.
They need you to be a singular label.
Need one word for you.
So they can process you, but you're just everything you are. So I kind of don't think about it that much. I just do the music, I do the comedy, and the comedy's sort of a little newer in the stand-up world, so that's been an interesting endeavor. The advocacy came out of not even a choice. It was just, we found ourselves in a world, and we can get to that later, of October 7th. Whatever public profile I felt I had or was building, I couldn't not say. This felt like, I'm not going to decide to be an advocate. I didn't even like the word. It felt like, ooh, I don't, that just feels too official and technical. I was just like, I'm just gonna, we can't exist in a world making art and having fun when the world feels a little bit broken and confused. I mean, the creative arts won't last very long in a world like that. So I felt like, let's get a few things straight here just to make sure we're all on the same page. So I started speaking out about that, and people responded to that too. So you throw things out into the universe when you're creative, and you see what happens.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I want to talk to you guys about kind of how your music has evolved since October 7th, but I also know there's a whole backlog of amazing music. I called you the Jewish Mumford & Sons. I don't know if that lands or not for you guys, but tell me a little bit about, turn off your post-October 7th brain with me for a second, and tell me a little bit about how would you describe your music and what you were trying to do. I think 2013 you guys started, right? So from 2013 to, let's call it, the first 10 years before COVID, give me the glimpse.
So it all happened very organically and also pretty quickly. So Duvid and I, had been writing some songs together, and just over the years, like we had mentioned, through Moshav and Blue Fringe, we became friends. We would start writing songs together on the side, and then Ami moved to LA. We were both living in LA, and when Ami moved, I think Ami suggested, we had written this one song that Ami came in and helped us finish, and it was being used in a movie. So right away, it was, we were kind of thrown into it. That's what prompted us to have to come up with a band name, very quickly. The Cousins thing, by the way, as you can tell, it was just all very familial and just felt like it fit. Yeah. And
then I have a story I'd love to tell at concerts. The first real song, so we finished this song Dov was talking about for this movie, and then we were, we really enjoyed the experience. It was really the first time the three of us got together to work, and
Ami
it was
suggested, let's write all three of us.
yeah. So I had just set up.
You're welcome.
I had just set up the studio. I had just learned how to use it, sort of how to use it in my back bedroom in a duplex. This was just me and my wife. I don't think we had a kid yet. And it was like the back bedroom, and there was someone upstairs, and I was always kind of nervous about making noise, and like I was waiting for them to complain. And then the first time we're together singing, we started writing the song, and we felt really good about it. We must have been singing it a lot, and the phone rings. And I'm like, oh no, I knew this was coming. I look, it's the upstairs neighbor, and she says, hey, and I'm like, first thing I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna stop. She's like, no, 1 second. She's like, I hear you making noise all the time. Whatever you're doing now sounds really good. Keep doing it.
And
I was like,
landed on something.
thank you.
So, it was a very
So
clear
really,
sign
we're just
to-
listening to
It was my wife.
whatever her name was upstairs.
And did you have like a sense, like as you were developing this band, that you were going to go for a specific sound? Like you each brought like your history that you alluded to before to the moment, and it was kind of like we're going for indie folk. Obviously, we all want to do that. Let's do that. Was that?
Well, maybe we all had even slightly different reasons, possibly. I know that one of my things I was excited about was coming from Moshav and coming from this really beautiful world, but like Ami was saying, like people quickly put you in a box and want you to do a certain thing, or even a lot of times it's self-imposed, like some things you think is successful, so you think, oh, I have to do it again. So I actually was yearning for a place to just get creative and just try whatever we felt like. And that was one of the things that excited me about us, is I just felt like, what do we want to do? Let's do it.
But also, to add to that, there's an interesting thing that happens, I think, as Jews, like in the world, and call it the diaspora, when you're looking out there, you sort of have your community that you have a relationship with, a dynamic with, and then you're looking out there, and you're like, what kind of impact can we make out there? And there's this give and take of, when, especially if you're artists, like what kind of appeal you can have while still maintaining your identity, but also being universal.
Right, particular versus universal.
So that affects, if you're going to make music, are you going to do verses in Hebrew, or are you going to make more universal messages that can appeal to a wider audience? And we're in LA, and there's a whole culture of that kind of Hollywood success.
Yes.
And you're influenced by that, and you want to partake in it, and that involves, if you want to get music into a commercial and into a trailer or a TV show or in a movie and a feature, there are certain things that will kind of limit it to specific audiences, and we were trying to see what kind of mark we could make on the wider sort of world of music. And we're fans of all that kind of modern music too. That's not necessarily in the Jewish space. And so that was, for me, a certain attempt to say, like, let's assemble. You guys have come from and made a real impact on the Jewish music world. Let's see what we can do out there and competing in that space. And I think what's interesting is, over time, the more and more you end up going full circle back to where you
Yeah, and one thing I remember, I just thought of this now though, but there was a moment where one of our songs, Are You Ready? It was a big moment for us, was chosen to be the final song of a big feature film called This Is Where I Leave You, with Jason Bateman. And it was a big moment for us because everything Ami was talking about, that's what we were aiming to do. And yet I remember thinking at the time also, like, we're going for that universal thing, and it's in this big movie. And this movie, This Is Where I Leave You, is about a family that loses someone, and they come together to sit Shiva together, to be together to mourn for 7 days. And it's like, you can't, not that we wanted to, but it's just, you can't escape it. And it's such a funny, reminder.
It's a great metaphor for the Jewish people in America, which is like, we just want to be out there, and it's like, oh, you're back.
Exactly, but in a good way.
It took us in the Hollywood experience. We did the red carpet, we went to the premiere, they're playing our song on Hollywood Boulevard, we meet all the cast, where, the photographers come out, cousins, snapping shots. So we go through that arc, and we spoke about this on recently with another friend about that sort of journey of going out there and then returning. So along that path, we were working in the industry, and as a band these days in the modern music business, like, we produce all our own music in-house, like together in a studio, which took us to doing composing work for film and TV and custom work. We did theme songs that were on Netflix television shows. We worked with DreamWorks Animation on a lot of stuff. So we really were just loving working together. So in addition to releasing our original music and our records, we were also just all lanes firing in the various aspects of the industry, and that was keeping us all fairly busy throughout our time in LA.
Got it.
So that's
All right, and then there's a series of albums also which come out. I've been exposed to them over the years, one of which is Here and Now, and I had asked you guys to share a little bit from that, and we discussed the song Here and Now from Here and Now. You know, before you play it for us, I'd love to just hear a little bit around, like, what was going on for you then? What's the story behind that song? What are you trying to accomplish with that song? And by the way, I apologize, I'm an educator, so I'm like, oh, you write a song to teach people XYZ, but I know that artists are making art. So with that caveat, tell me about Here and Now.
No, it's a good point, because we don't always set out, of course, every song is a different experience, so we don't always set out what do we want people to get out of it. More often than not, that's not the case, and we just write from whatever. That one in particular, we had a friend named Lindsay Ray, who's a great songwriter, who was visiting from Nashville.
This is when?
This was
2020.
Yeah, right
February of 2020.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
okay.
And we just sat down to write, and we talked about what was going on in all of our lives, and so this idea of just being present in the moment really struck us, and that's what the song was about. And then the craziest thing was it was about a week or two right before COVID lockdown that we didn't see each other for a really long time, and the song just took on a whole new meaning for us about being present. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, so just appreciate this moment that you're in. And
the lyric is, all we have is, there won't always be tomorrow, all we have is here and now. Life is sweet, but time is borrowed, all we have is here and now. 2 weeks later, shuts down.
Wow.
So now we have to be very careful what we write. What's going to happen?
We got a table of prophets here.
Record will be a smashing hit. That'll be the next song.
Exactly.
So it was just a very, also, from the heavens kind of sign of something. They took on this resonance, which was really amazing.
All right, so will you guys share it with us?
Yeah, let's play it.
Let's play some music.
There won't always be tomorrow, all we have is here and now. Life is sweet, but time is borrowed, all we have is here and now. Oh, the further I go, the closer I get to the goal, the less I know. Learning to hold the good and the bad and make peace with them both. There won't always be tomorrow, all we have is here and now. Life is sweet, but time is borrowed, all we have is here and now. Oh, nothing is old, so don't waste a second on all that you cannot control. You got to let go. Sometimes you can't tell the dark from the light when you're standing so close. There won't always be tomorrow, all we have is here and now. Life is sweet, but time is borrowed, all we have is here and now. I read your letters and I crumble like the pages. So much I never got to say. All we have is here and now. All we have is here and now.
A few things, using my literal brain, I apologize, but that's where I'll go. But I'm feeling it here a lot. One is just noticing, which is not obvious, like the fact that you guys sing together and the fact that you take turns singing, like leading different songs, and I assume writing different songs as well. There's probably bits of that. I think is just such a cool model in a world where like it's always about A or B or C, and like people, being able to collaborate and bring the best of each other. That's why I said the word super team, like super band before. It feels
Super
very
group, right.
super group. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, we've always talked about that, and like this idea, even coming into it, it feels a little like self-indulgent tooting your horn to call yourself a super group.
Yeah.
But it's true in that we always respected each other as individual artists with individual contributions and unique contributions that create a balance, which we think the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But even our vocal ranges, are in their own distinct spaces, and our styles and influences musically are from different places, which I think blend in a way.
It's also like our general, like our abilities complement each other, and they're very different in a lot of ways. And I've thought about that a lot, and often, talking to younger artists who, kids come up to me and ask me about, starting a band or how to get their music out there, and they're like, I can't find people who are like me, who are like-minded, and I'll often say, find people who aren't like you to team up with. Find someone who's good at something you're not, and that makes it more than the sum of its parts, as opposed to just finding people who do the same thing as you. I definitely think that in this, it's a band, but really it's like a friendship.
You feel it. I've spent time with you guys in different scenarios. You feel it, and I think there's a beautiful lesson in leadership there. My second question is, I'm going to put on my rabbi hat for a second, if that's all right with you guys. So, we're meeting right now during the month of Elul, the time of year where we're thinking about our relationships and we're thinking about how we are in the world and what we want to be in the coming year. And that song evokes, like, it challenges me in some ways, kind of like, what does it mean to be here and now? What does it mean to be present? Like, what are the relationships in my life where I should be like really leaning into being more present? And there was a line in there about, I think, reading letters that are gone, that kind of thing, something like a missed opportunity to be here and now. So I'll ask you guys on television, and you can pass if you want, but like, take a moment, like, share with us, like, is there, thinking about the next year for yourselves, if you want to be personal for a second, is there someone in your life who you feel like you want to lean into the here and now message about, or some aspect of your life that you want to take that on?
That's a good one. I mean, I'll start with, I think the obvious one for sure is just like my kids and being in a band, and a lot of what we do is traveling around. I mean, so much of it is about making sure that when we are all together that we're really present. And I think nowadays so much of the focus is like on the kids and the generation, how they're addicted to their phones and everything. But when we look at ourselves and our generation, we're just as guilty of it. And so I find that I try to really hold myself to the same standard and really be present with my kids when we're together, especially because we travel a lot and have to be away. And also just nurturing our own, like Duvid said, I mean, we're getting all mushy on each other, but our own relationship and friendship as a band, because being that we don't all live in the same city now, it really, we appreciate, I think, I'll speak for myself, appreciate so much more the time that we do have together. So
right, and sorry, I'll just add, right, because Duvid's in LA and you're just moved from Nashville to Atlanta, and you're in Englewood, which is a super different aspect of this band. People here, they're like, you guys are in 3 different cities doing what you do, and then you come together. So I hear that
we
point.
put in all the 10,000 hours in LA together, for many years, building our foundation. So it's not too difficult to coordinate and sustain it in that way creatively. It's funny when you say that about, like, we're guilty as our kids are guilty, because like, even a generation before us will look at us, oh, look at you guys all on your phones in the morning. I'm like, you guys all had newspapers in the morning, like, in a way. Like everyone's on their phone in the morning when I'm like with my mother-in-law or something, she'll say something like that, and I'm like, yeah, but I remember in your day, it's just like everyone, in a way, there's a version of it in every generation. Yeah, it's obviously a unique problem, I'm not taking it away. But
what it makes me think of is, I recently got to travel to Israel, and really felt that in a powerful way, that the people there feel very much alive, and my friends were all like, come on, live, enjoy. It's so much more than in Los Angeles. And there was something so beautiful about that, something also a little bit heartbreaking about that, because the way you're getting to that is unfortunately often through tragedy. And I guess if I was going to think of one thing, I'd just bless us that this coming year we get to understand that, to being in the moment, but through peace, and through quiet, and through building, as opposed to like tragedy.
Wow, beautiful.
I think also on your point about being in the moment. I think we're in an industry in general that is always kind of looking to what the next thing is, the next accomplishment. Where do we want to be? You're constantly like looking at things in this sort of hierarchical, ascendant or descendant way.
Yeah.
Are we going in this direction or not? Or I think alternatively, the healthier attitude is like, are we steady and doing the things along the way in a process that's fulfilling, enriching,
Right.
and contributing, as opposed to trying to hit various particular markers and never actually enjoying and taking part and taking pride and fulfillment in what you're doing in the moment and the impact it's having now, as opposed to some stepping stool to some other thing. And then you're never present in the accomplishments of what you're doing in the moment because you're wondering what it's doing for the next thing.
Right.
So I think...
Yeah, you were good about reminding us, I think, we just recently did that tour with Matisyahu, and that was a great example. Like, well, what's coming up next? What's going to this lead to? And Ami was like, just look at where we are right now. This is the coolest thing, and just appreciate that we're here right now.
I love that contribution as well. That's such a great way of looking at things. You know, I heard recently that that's U2 says in their Huddle, the band U2 is one of the most successful bands. They say right before they get on stage, they say, "Let us be useful," which I thought was so powerful. It's like really, in the end of the day, what are you contributing? You know, this is our sort of, not to be super cheesy about it, but this is our gift.
Totally.
You know, this is what we have to give.
And if you're lucky enough to hit certain goals or accomplishments, you will not enjoy them if that's all you were focused on along the way.
Right.
What you really, it's not the accomplishments and the goals that you get to, I don't think. It's everything you do to get there that is what the thing is.
Right.
Which is so Jewish at its core. I mean, the whole book of the Talmud is all about the debate and the discussion and of appreciating it, not necessarily the outcome of it.
Right. What you become in doing it is the
right. We're a little far off, but I think of the holiday of Sukkot in that respect, right? So Passover, you have like the moment of like falling in love, where you there start the relationship with the Jewish people and God, and at Shavuot, 7 weeks after that, you have the moment of like marriage. We're going to commit to a contract with God at Mount Sinai, and then Sukkot, you have this like celebration of living in sukkahs in the desert. What is going on there? It's like, okay, no, actually, like, and that's Zman, like that's the happiest holiday, right? So that's like, when's the happiest? It's not Passover. It's not the giving of the Torah. It's celebrating the journey of going through the desert, and like each morning waking up on the journey. I think it's beautiful.
In the marriage abyss with
exactly.
God.
In the marriage abyss with God. But I think it resonates so much.
That's
like
good.
I think what you're saying, Ami, around like setting you set these professional goals that you like need to get to them, but you miss the whole ride. Same with kids, right? Obviously, right? You're like you have these big moments you want them to get to. So I always laugh at like you have like the whole town comes to see like a chumash play, let's say, or a siddur play, like some moving up moment. And it's like, by the way, if like all those people came and just spent like an hour with them on a Tuesday, they would get so much out of it instead of them watching them. But
I saw an interview with Jerry Seinfeld about like just the relationship with his kids, and like how something they spoke about was like sometimes the most ordinary moment when you have kids can every second of every day could be the best thing that's ever happened to you. Right. And he's like, what did you mean by that? They asked me, he's like, I don't know, my son comes in and says, it's 11 p.m., you want to have some cereal? And I said, yeah, I'd love to have some cereal. And so finding like fulfillment in the ordinary things, not the extraordinary things or that we pedestal as extraordinary.
Specifically in the Seinfeld house. Right?
But I think it goes to Dov's first point a little bit also, right? Like you kind of like we're saying, like being, I think the phrase I use is being radically present, right? If you can be radically present with your kids for 5 minutes a day, you like crushed it. But you could spend 6 hours with them and be present for 0 of them.
So it's funny you bring it into the numbers, because that's something that I've learned from Duvid. Duvid's all about the timer. Like he's a beast on guitar, as you can see, and he practices every day and sets a timer. And then we start using timers for everything. We're like, okay, let's be productive and give ourselves 20 minutes to write. So we use that in the band a lot. And then I started thinking about it like that with my kids. It's like, if you just go through the numbers, like how much time do we actually have in the morning before they go to school? So let me make the most of this 30 minutes. And then they get home, and before bedtime, we only have maybe 2-3 hours. So really just kind of focusing in on that, I find sometimes that helps when you...
Beautiful. And you mentioned the touring with Matisyahu. I know you just completed, let's call it the summer leg, and you have the let's call it the fall-winter-ish leg, depending what state you're in coming up.
Thank you. Let's hear for Disney Cousins. It's incredible band up here.
What's that been like for you guys?
It was really, truly amazing. We were talking about it last night. For us, it was relaxing, and I mean, you know, it felt a little bit like a vacation, but really on a deeper level, you know, we're big fans of his music and have been since I first heard his first. I think somebody played me "Chop 'Em Down," and I was like, what's this? This is better than anything I've heard, you know. And we're such fans, and we got to watch him every night, and I think also that this energy that's, you know, the world has changed for all of us since October 7th, and it's changed for him as well. And being together at these concerts and people coming to the concerts to celebrate Israel and their love for Israel, love for each other. You know, no matter what, we all have our opinions, we all have our different feelings about things, but we all love and cherish Israel. And if that felt so powerful, but also in this beautiful way that's really about sharing your art.
And when you the first leg of the tour through the summer, I mean, we went to Massachusetts and then upstate New York, not Jewish upstate New York, which is like an hour and a half in. I'm talking deep up into like
Canandaigua.
Yeah, near Rochester. And what's amazing is when you get out of the cities and the coastal stuff, where we just feel like we're in this constant defense mode, cesspool of morally backwards ideas about what's going on in Israel, and overly academic-sized, if that's a word, ideas of how to process this stuff. Well, it's complicated. What's the context? To just be able to play music for 500 Philo-Semites is a really nice breath of fresh air. And it gives you a sense of, you know, maybe on social media and in our algorithms and in these highlights of doom scrolling, we're seeing one picture, and that might not just be what's really out there. When you get out into the world and you see, you know what, I think there's hope, there's support, there's love. And Matisyahu, as a magnet for that, brings all of that out, because everyone knows where he stands. He's draping an Israeli flag over himself and singing for all kinds of Jews and non-Jews alike who share in the message and the positivity. And just to see that, it's a very encouraging thing and really needed when you're constantly on the defense for basic Jewish dignity.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that, about just as, you know, a fan of Matisyahu, is that he's doing that, but he's also really honest and real about his music and his art. He's not pandering. He's doing really what is moving him. It's very real. So to me, that it's so meaningful, because you see things and you sometimes, you know, you can't relate to it. For me as an artist and a musician, seeing that feels really great, and, you know, hope that some of it rubs off on us.
It's inspiring to be unapologetically standing for what you believe in. And speaking of pandering, even in the world, it's become such a politicized topic, this whole thing of post-October 7th, at a time when it really felt like it shouldn't be. This should be an easy conversation to have, and we can get into the weeds on it, but the pandering, the signaling, the people afraid to say, just to be unapologetically, like it's not a controversial thing to get out there, put an Israeli flag on, and sing proudly Jewish-themed music. And just to take that stand, people call brave, which is kind of ironic and it's kind of strange. It's a strange compliment. You take it, but I'm just happy it's being done, and hopefully will connect and is connecting with more people than the opposite messages. You know.
So tell me, you referenced kind of October 7th and what it did for Matisyahu a little bit, and with you guys as well. How we could talk about your personal experience from October 7th. I want to hear a little bit around how your music has evolved since October 7th, let's say. What's the effect of that on your guys' artistic music process? Culminating with an album that you just released, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I view it as, like what Ami was saying before about your advocacy, is that you didn't really have a choice. It's not something that we necessarily set out. It was just that happened so naturally and organically. I mean, you could talk about it, but Duvid had these beautiful gems of ideas based on Tehillim, based on Psalms, and had told us about it actually even before October 7th, that he was working on it. And, you know, at the time we wanted to hear it, but we were also unsure of how that would fit in with our distant cousins' music that we had already done and everything, so we didn't think much of it. And then right after October 7th, like the next day, I reached out to Duvid and said, can you send me some of those ideas? I think I need them right now. Just because, you know, historically in our religion, those are what we turn to for healing. And so it really just started out of that for ourselves. and they were already beautiful ideas that Duvid brought to us, and then we got to work on them all together in person, really like a week or two after October 7th. And yeah, I mean, it just came out of that, of us working on this as a healing process for ourselves, and then it turned into this body of work that we realized.
I don't think I realized. So are all the songs from Tehillim?
Almost all, I think 5 out of 6.
And it's like a coming home in the sense of like I said before, as we went out there into the wider world outside of the Jewish communal music space, you know, to come back to it. I love the fact that, you know, there was always this little bit of fun pride I took in being a band that happens to be Jewish.
Right.
We walk around with this like, I'm not ashamed of it, I'm happy to talk about it, but it's like, you know, the people who know.
Right.
And not everyone has to know.
Right.
And I think a lot of Jews in the modern Orthodox world we grow up in, like, walk around with that a little bit like, oh yeah, no, I'll tell my bosses and colleagues like about my holidays and stuff, but to wear it on your sleeve, it just feels so refreshing to be able to do that at a time when I think there's a lot of people who are feeling a certain Jew shaming or Zionist shaming or whatever, and to be able to make art that really is simpatico with the identity that we are is really a breath of fresh air for me. To be able to do that and not feel any sort of hang up or about it, and also being able to contribute to this Jewish music renaissance that I feel has been going on with the Yishai Ribos and Akivas and Matisyahu, and to be part of that and make a contribution to that, it feels like a really great time as all those things converge.
Beautiful. So you guys are raising so many things. One, I just want to flag your point, which is, you know, I was in the car with somebody yesterday who said to me, I'm only listening to Hebrew music now. That's where I'm at, which is interesting. I think for myself personally, I'm very, very into music, deeply into music. I listen to a ton of music, like to a fault. My kids have been trained that you can't shower without music blasting. Like, in the car, we're fighting every morning in carpool, like who picks the song. And there was this moment of kind of like, I think a lot of people had this after October 7th, which was like, wow, I'm investing so much energy, time, emotions, and resources into all this music, and it's not clear to me if the people that are singing, I'm not saying like an us or them, but an element of like, okay, some of these people are like vocally very anti-Israel, and that's very hard.
We've lost a few good ones.
We've lost some good ones, you know.
And some of it's even incorporated into their art. I mean,
right, for sure.
Doesn't have to mention who, but I mean, some
it's
who I
heartbreaking.
respect and love their music, and then
it's hard. That's exactly the word.
Don't tell me.
I know.
I
The
can't
number
listen
of
to
text
anything.
messages I got over. I won't mention artists by name, but like people know I like a certain artist, and I got bombarded. Did you see what they said? You can never go to a concert again. It's like, and people are like, "Are you mad?" I'm like, "I'm sad. I'm just sad." That's what I'm feeling, because like I feel like if I sitting in a room with that person and we could have a conversation, like, you know, I don't know if they'd see the light, let's say, but at least we could make some rational points. So I think that's so hard, and I think you're naming that, like, growing out of that one silver lining is people being like, okay, well, there is this music that's like for me, that reflects values I have, that gives me access to Tehillim. What a beautiful Psalms, right? Like, you know, so many people are on these chats where they'll say Psalms, but Psalms is hard to access sometimes. It's very long, and the Hebrew is not always easy. And to say, like, you know, actually we're going to set this to music, and we're going to give you a way that you can sing along to this, I think is like, you're really giving people a way in through that lane. It's beautiful. It's like, right. So one of the songs. So I was on a hiking trip in Maine recently with close friends from college, and my friend Simon Brief. We had kind of a quiet moment. Ami knows Simon. We were like at the top of a mountain. We were to like relax and listen to something and like think it out a little bit. And he just like threw on this song Dimati, which I had not heard yet. I didn't even know it was you guys, to be frank, because it wasn't like a talking situation. He just like close your eyes and listen to this, and I was just like, whoa, and it like hit me hard. And then I realized it was you guys, and I was like, oh, that's cool.
I think you may have heard it live, but not on a recording.
Right, exactly.
You came up to me like, what was that last one?
Yeah.
So it had its way.
Right, it has its way. And so I requested that in advance here. I'd love to hear you guys, if you're comfortable, share that with us as well.
So really this song, you know, so Dov mentioned that story where the first time we spoke on the phone, which was, you know, at the end of the holiday, I guess it was October 8th or 9th, we had that conversation, and Dov said that to me. He said, please send me, I need to hear this. And I had all these ideas because I'd had a little bit of a health scare a couple of years ago, and started reading Tehillim, Psalms. Because, you know, someone told me, it almost felt weird to me at the beginning, but then as I started reading, I did find it to be comforting. And then whenever I would find like a line that felt extra meaningful, I would sort of often compose a little melody, just sometimes to remember it, you know, to remember the line. And when Dov said, send me the ideas, I listened to them quickly, and I was like, suddenly I feel like I felt like it wasn't quite good enough. I felt like, oh, I can't send them this. Sort of sat down, hoping something would come. Also, it's so heavy then, hoping something would happen. And I opened Tehillim and literally saw the first words of this song, which are, Al tazveni, al tirchak mimeni. Don't leave me, don't turn away from me, which felt powerful. And then the next line that I saw was, Shma tefilati, hear my prayer, Ha'azina el Dimati, listen to my tears. And the idea of listen to my tears, something felt, it was exactly how I was feeling. The tears were so visceral, so real, that I could feel like you could feel it, hear the tears everywhere. And then sent Dov that idea, and then we finished the song, all, the three of us together, and it just sums up something. And since then I've seen this thing also in the Gemara and the Talmud, Masechet Brachot, they say about this Psalms, they say, Afilu shesha'arei tefillah nin'alu, even though the gates of prayer have been closed, and I think they're referencing the destruction of the second temple. Sha'arei dim'a lo nin'alu, the gates of tears have remained open. And that's a wild line, but what it means to me more and more when we sing this song is sometimes the words fail you. Sometimes something is so overwhelmingly crushing or life-changing that words fail. Tears don't fail you. Tears are real. And I feel the same way with music. Sometimes. When you can do. This is Dimati.
Beautiful.
אל תעזבני, אל תרחק ממני, אל תעזבני, אל תרחק ממני, אל תעזבני, אל תרחק ממני, אל תעזבני, אל תרחק ממני. שמע תפילתי, האזינה אל דמעתי. שמע תפילתי, האזינה אל דמעתי. אל תעזבני, אל תרחק ממני, אל תעזבני, אל תרחק ממני. שמע תפילתי, האזינה אל דמעתי. שמע תפילתי, האזינה אל דמעתי. הצילני, הושיעני, הצילני נא. הצילני, הושיעני, הצילני נא. תפילתי, האזינה אל דמעתי. שמע
Dimati, Hazina, Dimati, Hazina, Dimati.
It's first of all, yeah. There's so many emotions right now. I guess I'll just say that again, I guess we're in the season, but this is evoking for me also high holiday stuff as well, which is like, you know, it's interesting to me that Tehillim Psalms is like the Jewish songbook. It's like the original Jewish songbook, right? And like, I think growing up for me, I think of like my great grandmother, my grandma Dora, like, you know, every morning saying her Tehillim and sitting over it and over and over and over again. You see like sometimes women at the Kotel, the Western Wall, the same idea. But these are songs, and then to set them to music that like is so evocative and relatable today and beautiful and evokes emotion and fits in with the words, just like hits you. And I think one of the questions, certainly, you know, I'm part of a group we've been learning together in Englewood, and one of the questions we discussed this week was, how do you approach the day of God's kingship, right? Rosh Hashanah is like you crown the king again that year, that kind of thing, and like, someone said to me, like, this was a bad year for God, right? This is a bad year for the king. Like, how do you just show up to the king and be like, you're the king when like there's terrible things happening there? And I think, you know, going back to what you evoked from the Talmud, that story of like, okay, maybe some gates are closed, but the gates of the tears are still open. Like this moment of like, it feels very just like, you know, this is what I have. Listen to my tears. This is what I have. This is what I can bring to you this year. I can't bring the like, you know, we hit our marks this year. Great year. It was a bad year. And having that emotional relationship with the divine is like.
Yeah. I just heard a talk with Rabbi Wolpe. He was doing an interview with an atheist who was questioning him, a very thoughtful, you know, skeptic. But they were talking about good and evil, and there's always the generic answers of you can't have good without evil, you need both, but he gave a more nuanced answer, which I thought was very deep, which is that good on its own without the existence of evil, you know, isn't really definitive of what good is, but rather contending with it, having to contend with evil and tragedy is how you can discover goodness. In other words, it's that relationship to it, that inevitable relationship to it in the world that we inhabit, that we discover our goodness, and that everybody possesses a little bit of both in them. And it's that being embattled with it and returning even with tragedy as an opportunity to, you know, kind of lean into the moment and discover your goodness. And I think having that constant contention is what maybe goodness really is.
Well, there's also this idea of, you know, Rabbi Leonard Cohen, who says there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in, which I really connect to. Sure. And we even sing sometimes on high holidays where I pray, because like, to me, a lot of it is about that. It's Judaism is not necessarily about goodness. It's about the universe, and the universe contains darkness and light, and there's some kind of balance happening. It's not about pretending that everything's good or everything's a certain thing. It's about everything is incorporated into God. Everything, God, the universe, and we're trying to find our own relationship to it. And that can only come through some type of authentic connection.
And Yisrael means the struggle with God. We don't hide that fact that it's built into the Jewish identity as our relationship to the divine is a struggle by name. So.
More about, I feel like Judaism is more about questions than answers.
I'll add just to
speaking your language.
I'm speaking my language. I'll tie it all together. Maybe, you know, we spoke a little bit around you know, the fact that you guys come together and bring your different aspects. You know, another way to think about the word Yisrael is that it's an acronym for all of our mothers and fathers, the Imahot and the Avot. So the Yud is Yitzchak and Yaakov. The Sin is Sarah. The Resh is Rachel and Rivka. The Aleph is Abraham and the Lam.
Beautiful. I never heard that before.
So it's like, it's also, we have all of our, you know, it represents. Each person has to show up with their voice, and together we make music, and that's what Yisrael is.
And creativity, we think about like the idea of B'Tselem Elokim, the image of God. What makes us have that spark of divinity is the ability to create. Yeah. And creation comes from tension, it comes from friction, it comes from being embattled. and that generates, life, creativity, and
music.
I think that you can't have that without the tension. So you can look at it in terms of good versus bad, or just tragedy and everything else that comes with it.
Right.
And it's not necessarily labeling it good or bad in these qualifiers, but it's just being in the struggle that is the Jewish journey.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's the album that Dimati is on that we just had is Out of the Darkness, and that's one thing that we were talking about. I think a couple weeks after October 7th, I showed you a song. I said, did you hear this song that just came out of Israel? And David's like, I love it. I love that Jews, immediately afterwards were turning it into art,
Look at what we do.
What hit me so hard, I got to go with my family. We had a New York visit, stayed at Ami's house, and visited Ellis Island and found some of our ancestors. But what hit us the hardest was walking through all those rooms, which is this beautiful museum now. One of the last rooms is just posters of Yiddish theater and comedy and music, a whole room full of it, and seeing what these people went through, our ancestors, got off the boat and literally overnight suddenly turned this thing into creativity and joy. And to me, I feel, that's my people. Yeah.
Wow.
And just to add to that, the idea is that when tragedy strikes collectively on such a level, if you look at what this last year has been, are we defeated by it, or are we unleashed? Are we discovered? Are we, being made to feel more alive than ever? And you get into that normalcy bias routine of taking everything for granted, and obviously, I wish it never kind of happened, but at the same time also to look to the cracks, to let the light in, what we as a people and we as individuals, we as a band, what so many people I've been inspired by to see is that it's unleashed us in the most positive of ways.
Just use our lyric, because I'm bringing it back out of the dark. What you're saying, that's the lyric in that song, is out of the darkness into the light, into the spirit that can't be broken.
Just bent, but not broken.
Beautiful. And I think the last thing I'll just say to close this is that, I think you mentioned Yiddish theater in America, and I think often today we think about it's from Israel. The best Torah is coming from Israel. The best music's coming from Israel. Music for Jews by Jews is coming out of Israel. I think what you guys represent is the ability, can we have now a renaissance of Jewish American music in a way that really lifts up the Jewish part alongside the American part. And I hope you guys are, a part of a huge movement. There should be more and more of this so our children can have love not only Israeli bands, but love American Jewish bands. All right. Guys, thank you so much. What a treat to have you in the studio today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ay, ay, ay,